Yep. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Corporate Services and Economic Growth Overview and Scrutiny Committee here on the 7th of March. So, the agenda. So, the first thing is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies? No? Okay. Next is the minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated, and pages 1 to 6. Any comment? Oh, just in time. Any comments on the minutes? Are we happy they're a true record? Agreed? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Liz.
Can I just ask, Chair, on page 4, the budget consultation report, members would be provided with demographical information collected from it. Have we had that yet, or have I missed it? Oh, we're getting it.
I don't think I've seen it. No, can we chase that? This was the demographic information on the budget consultation, wasn't it?
Yeah, was not it was part of the council papers or not?
No, well, it wasn't in the papers we received on the
I
consultation.
don't think so.
No.
I thought that was the intention, so I will chase it up.
Thank you.
Well, it may have, but I didn't see them. But I think if we can just chase that up, that'd be great. But apart from that, oh, Mark, welcome.
Just similar sort of thing. It was my question on community services. And it says we will be given a detailed list of the services. Just we haven't had that neither.
Okay. Can make a note to chase the relevant officers on that.
Will do.
Thanks. Right, okay. So we're happy. We'll move on to disclosure of members' interests. Oh, Councillor Murphy.
Sorry, I should have got this prepared. Yeah, just to let the committee know that although I'm not yet on the Board of Advance, I am in the process of being placed on the Board of Advance. So I am still able to speak about anything that's here today, but I just want to give notice that I will be going on to it.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. Any other declarations? No? Right, next is for information is the forward plan of cabinet decisions. That's just a note.
Yeah, nothing new to report there, Chair.
Okay, our first paper, Household Support Fund update. Now, we don't have any cabinet members, but I think Maureen Taylor is going to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an update report on the Household Support Fund that we were allocated back in October 2021. The fund is 2.4 million and it runs until the 31st of March. This is an update position to the 31st of December. I have my colleague Paul Brooks here, who's the head of Northumberland Communities Together, who can go through the detail of that. I'm pleased to say that a lot of the activity has picked up over the winter months, and we can give you some overview of that, which is detailed in the report. I'll just pass you over to Paul for the detail on the content.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, Chair. So yes, the paper is our first management information return that needs to be submitted back to the DWP position as of the 31st of December. Obviously, the report covers a number of variants because we had to provide an actual expenditure point at that date, but actually there was a lot of money and a lot of claims still going through process. So actually we're able to give the figure of where we believe we were at that date, as opposed to what actually went in DWP return and was signed off by the Section 151 officer, Jan Willis. So at the time, obviously we made a statement back in end of December of £708,623,000, which had already been receipted and paid out, with actually further claims up to the value of £1,645,000 being processed, and that was mainly to cover the Christmas, New Year holiday period for schools, and obviously quite a lot of money was going through to reach households with children at that point. So there was an 835 variance still remaining in the overall allocation. Since then, we've continued to do a lot of work to try and reach some of our most vulnerable communities, working with town and parish councils, with members, to identify those communities where potentially some support on the ground might reach vulnerable people who may not be aware of the scheme, but could be in need of support and assistance. So a number of kind of tailored pop-up events and targeted interventions at local communities. We've also supported the February half-term and there's a commitment to support the Easter half term, and those payments as part of the grant determination will be made in March prior to the 31st of December. There will be an allocation to support households with fuel and households with food. So as it currently stands, we've got a confidence in making sure that we spend our grant allocation and that reaches as many families and households as we can in Northumberland. So just similar to the COVID winter support grant, which we managed on behalf of the council, and the COVID local support grant, we fully exhausted those grants, and again I'm confident that we'll do the same. Roughly around 40,000 households have been supported, and we're estimating at the current commitments to date of an expenditure of 2.3 million, which is 100,000 short of actually what the allocation. So as I say, high level confidence from our end that we will get this money out to those families and to those households who need support at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions? Councillor Murphy?
Yeah, thanks. Just some clarification on a few things. So the fund goes up to the 31st of March, but you've just described having accounted for Easter half term, which is in the next financial year. So could you just explain to me how that happens? I also understand that the payments are discretionary. Do you have a kind of informal ceiling amount that you will allocate to a particular family? How do you determine, you know, whether somebody gets £20 or £100, or is it a one-off, or can a family be helped in an ongoing way? So just in terms of the detail of how it operates, I'm interested in. And also just, I would like clarification in table 2, support for food, of which is supporting households without children 0 to 19 years. If you could explain the first table of numbers to me, it will help me to interpret the rest. So anticipated spend is 700,000, actual total is 71,000, committed is 350,000, and then underneath you've got your 421,000. Anticipated spend 700,000, what time period is that for? And so why is the actual showing as only 71? And if it's committed, does that mean that you have already basically allocated it to particular schemes? And if so, what are those schemes? Sorry, that's quite a lot, but thanks.
Okay, thank you. If you had to pick that up.
Yes, I'll pick them up. So, which way? Start there. So I'll talk about the table first, just about the actual and anticipated. So we had to provide DWP with a delivery plan. So on receipt of grant determination, we had to put a plan in place to say how we might spend that. So at the time, obviously, there were unknowns and obviously best guess about how we were going to allocate that, but recognising it would be based on the actual need that comes through the process. So at the time, we'd anticipate 700,000 spend for families with children. The grant is for households with children without. The 80-20 split that was in previous grants had been removed, so that we're eligible now to 50-50 or whatever the need is for Northumberland. At that point, we'd actually only paid 71,000 out to households because none of the Christmas and New Year hadn't come through, so we had committed that money had been paid up front, but just hadn't gone through our financial receipt processes. So that's the difference in there. So that table is looking at where we originally thought we would be spending the money against where we were, and actually what we've committed. The grant does allow us to support the Easter half term, and that was clarified through DfE and DWP in the grant determination, as long as we make our payments in advance of the 31st, which we do because it's a pre-ordered. So we're able to support those families in the early weeks of April, but actually because the fund's already prepaid for in advance of the school holiday dates, and we'll commit to support those with food and fuel over that period as we can. Was the other question there as well? Those ones. Yes.
How much and how
Yes, so the triage, so all referrals come in, and obviously I'm fortunate I've got a number of staff who have worked around welfare support and assistance in the past for another year, for a number of years, and with social care. So every call is triaged to look at what the needs are of the individual or the household, and that discretionary payment is based on on a number of factors of what we think we need to do in order to help families, and it's not a one-off 25 payment. It is based around the needs, and they vary. So for some instances, it may be just support with purchasing food for a period of time because there's been some crisis or some financial hardship in the house. For others, it may be the fact that, you know, the cooker's gone off, they can't cook, so they need support with either a maintenance cost, a call-out cost, or the purchase of new white goods. So there is no real ceiling in the sense of it's truly down to what the household and individual circumstances are, and what we believe is an appropriate level of assistance to support them at that time of need. And yes, we've seen households come through again. So we've now been doing this for obviously a number of years. So, you know, households we may have supported through a previous scheme through COVID local support grant or COVID winter support grant are being supported through the households support fund. So we wouldn't kind of exclude them just because they'd been through the system once before.
Anyone wanted to come in there?
Yeah, just through yourself, Chair. Councillor Murphy, I think it's fair to say that the work that the teams are doing with this grant is to try and prevent these individuals and families ending up in statutory services. So the interventions are quite bespoke for that purpose. We don't wish to do sticking plasters, so a £25 voucher, if that's not the answer, we don't spend that time with that. We spend time with the family to understand what is the need, how do we get them out of that difficulty and sustain that. But what we can't do is replace other benefits or other grants or other arrangements. So it's quite a technical issue per family, per individual. And some of the work that Paul and the team have been doing in the community pop-ups is to spend time with people explaining what this fund can do. But what we're doing is also at the same time undercovering, are they getting the allowances and the benefits that they're entitled to? Or you're getting them onto a better footing, basically, rather than this be a one-off, a quick repair, and then we get wind over and then we discover actually they're no further forward. That would be a failure in my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, I think we've got Liz next.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Maureen, for this presentation, and, you know, welcome though this fund is. I do worry that it doesn't sort of come close to meeting the scale of the challenges that we'll be facing going forward. We've still got the highest level of unemployment in the North East at the minute. But I do welcome the fact that it's discretionary, and I think the way that Northumberland Communities Together go about allocating this fund is absolutely fabulous. My worry is when this finishes in March, Maureen, is there anything that takes its place, or we're just left, you know? I have a couple of questions just about the fund itself. How long is the process of somebody sort of applying or putting an application in for this and then getting support? And what was the proportion of applications that were declined, if there were any? And like before, would it be possible to have some sort of report coming back here about the demographic bits of this support, what areas of the county were heavily reliant on this? And that was all, except for in table 2, the plan that Mary was referring to before, but column D, the support for energy and water. I mean, it's very obvious that that expenditure has been committed now, that it's overspent in that particular place. And I think water bills, we're about to see them increase by about 10%, I think, and the electricity and everything else. So can we be assured that this money will be wired to that area, that will still be covering that going forward? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Got to take those.
Yeah. So first, hopefully, obviously at this moment in time, we don't know whether there's going to be a further extension or another scheme come out. Obviously, we've been really fortunate that the COVID winter support grant turned into COVID local support grant, which in turn then turned into the household support fund. It would be wonderful if the government continued with the level of support. We know the current situation and the pressure on fuel costs going up in the future. In regards to timescale, so we where possible try and do a cash first approach, which is the government's approach, and so try and get money out as quickly as possible to people. That from receiving a referral in can literally be minutes to actually make contact with the individual, talk about the award, and actually make an electronic payment onto their mobile phone so that they can go and cash that out at any convenience store that has a pay point solution, so they can either purchase goods with that, they can top up energy, top up meters, or they can actually withdraw as cash. So yeah, again, trying to put a little bit of dignity and choice into the way that their support and how they want to use those. So generally, I would like to think we certainly within referrals that come in are dealt with on the same day basis, generally, and as quickly as possibly we can. In terms of kind of how many have not, we tend not to turn anyone down if they're not eligible for this scheme. The beauty of Northumberland Communities Together is we will still try and support them. That may be through connecting them in with other voluntary community organisations who might be able to offer supports, or other funded initiatives that other organisations may be doing. So we try and not leave anybody hanging. If the Household Support Fund can support them, then obviously we use that. But that doesn't mean that we won't still pass them on and through other pathways to get other elements of support that they may be in need of. So I'd like to say we've never really turned anyone down. They may not, this may not have been the most appropriate route for them, but we would support them in other ways.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I think from what I have experienced with my ward, I think NCT is doing a fabulous job in terms of responsiveness and quickness and compassion. So my question is that when I'm reading this report, it looks like local authorities are encouraged to identify vulnerable households. Does that mean the focus had not been on vulnerable households, and now we are being asked to focus on vulnerable households? So, and then you are saying later that from 1st January to 31st of March, we will see an increase in targeted support for vulnerable communities. So are you collecting statistics to see how many of those families we help are really coming from vulnerable background?
Thank you. Can we have a response?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think one thing that's been really good with the recent, all of the grant schemes that we've been afforded opportunity to work with is the government has recognised that local authorities are best placed to actually identify vulnerability within their community. So with it being discretionary, it hasn't been focused on benefits or certain claimants that other welfare support systems may use. So that vulnerability comes in a variety of sizes and shapes, and I think really what we've been afforded the opportunity to look at data in a number of guises to say actually what does vulnerability look like for us in Northumberland, who needs support, where is the system currently not supporting them, where is that financial hardship or insecurity, and how can this fund support those? So we've you know, and that's where we've worked with VCSE organisations, with town and parish councils, with members to identify, you know those communities, you have connection with them, what's presenting at your door or in your ward, and who are those groups, because they may not be clearly identified by a vulnerable group by another statutory organisation or another scheme. So I think that is the discretion that this scheme has allowed. So vulnerable people is really up to us to determine who is vulnerable and needs that level of support. And you know, as long as it's tied to the scheme through support for food, fuel, essentials of utilities, then we're able to go in there and offer that. And of course, through you know, the impact of some of the storms, and that again, that vulnerability has increased because of people and the challenges they face. So again, we've been able to offer support where those vulnerabilities have emerged through the challenge of a storm, and then people present themselves because they were in need of support and assistance. So it's been I think we've been fortunate in the sense of that term vulnerability at a local level. We've been gifted the opportunity to say, identify it, and where possible step in and support those communities as best you can using the data that we have at a local level.
I think in addition to I think you're doing a fantastic job in terms of helping. What I'm focusing on here is the collection of data, so that we in future we can go back and refer to the data, identify where the vulnerabilities are in case this fund stops. So we may have to think about other ways of getting money to help those vulnerable people. So I'm more interested in the collection of data.
Thank you. Maureen, you wanted to come in on that?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Councillor, we are doing some mapping of the allocations by postcode. We are using the data sets that we have in the council to see what that looks like. So we will have a heat map, for want of a better term, to look at where we've touched the county with this particular grant, but also what we've done since the beginning of the pandemic with the other grants as well. So we've had a lot of money. We've been very fortunate that the government have allocated significant swathes of money, and we do need to check that you know, this is being applied in the right places. I'd also like to evidence that these potentially could be our long-term targeted wards and areas for further work around bringing people out of that vulnerability through whatever means we have in the council. Thank you.
And we've got Councillor Oliver.
Thank you. That was an interesting report, and it's good to see that all of the money is predicted to have been spent by the end of the year, which is really good to get it out into the communities. Can I just ask, support Councillor Dunn's request for a breakdown by ward? I think, you know, that the heat map that Maureen was just talking about would be really useful to see that, and then we can see if there's if there are any wards that are kind of missing out because perhaps the community organisations in their areas are not so strong, and they're not signposting people to this funding. And then can I also ask a question about whether the funding has been applied in all cases directly to the households, or has some of it been passported through other organisations? And if so, could we have a breakdown of which organisations have had that money, if that's been the case?
I'm sorry. So, okay. As Maureen said there, we are working with our business intelligence team to try and pull that data together at a postcode level, so we can start to provide the demographic of where that fund's gone to at a ward level. So we will bring that back at some stage once we've got that we've got that data in an appropriate style and format, so it makes sense. What was the second question there?
Pick up the second question. In terms of working with other organisations, then obviously the food provision that we work through the schools to get that to the individual families, and then we do have trusted partners where we provide them with support to make sure that they're reaching their local communities as well. So we've got a systematic approach about where this cash flows through to, because if we were to wait and rely on individual direct contact into the council, then we would clunk up the system. That'd be too slow. So we get it out to our trusted partners, and then we work with them to reach into the local communities, and that's served us well for the last couple of years. But we will have that data coming through, so we can see what the spread's been.
So could we have a breakdown of that then, of which of those trusted organisations have had what money? That would be.
Yeah, Councillor, I can provide. I mean, we've been fortunate. There's part of the return, part of our statutory grant usage. We have to identify those third-party organisations who we supported. We've used them certainly in the past a lot. At this moment in time, we've not actually made a third-party organisation payment through the Household Support Fund. We've been managing that purely because of the volume and some of the work that we've been doing. But I think as we come towards the end, especially with the pressure on fuel, we may need to look at partners. But again, as we do that, it will be identified on the return, but we can share that with members.
Thank you very much. Right. Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. It's bottom of page 13 again. It's about, and I know we're kind of like at the end of the scheme, but it says supports not restrict the vulnerable households in receipt of benefits. Now, it seems to me what we've been talking about here is referrals all the time, and I'm wondering how, principally because I think the demographics of need is about to change drastically, how can somebody who isn't in receipt of benefits but is certainly vulnerable, how can they access the scheme, or have they been able to access the scheme, seeing as we're getting to the end of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question. So we have a number of routes into the service. So working with partners, referrals come direct from other VCSE organisations, statutory partners, food banks, others, so they will refer an individual in. We've done a lot of pop-up sessions, so going out and about in the communities, you know, raising awareness of this support and other support in that holistic approach, to just so that people are getting the level of support they want. So generally it's either direct through targeted intervention work where we know, so free school meal entitlement is an easy one. Some of our services, through social care, working with health colleagues. So referrals come in either through a trusted partner or directly to ourselves, often from counsellors who know their wards. And again, through those pop-up activities and those targeted interventions out in communities where we'll spend a day letting people know that we're on site and offering that more walk-up option to get support and assistance.
Okay, so that's everybody that wanted to speak. So we, obviously this is going to Cabinet, so we're happy to note it and support the, well, note the information and, okay. Right, thank you very much. Moving on. One thing to add, I've just had a message from Councillor Jackson giving his apologies, so can we add him to the apologies list? On to the work programme, so that's on 1924, Sean?
Nothing to add to what's always previously been reported, Chair.
Right, thank you. Urgent business, if any? None? Right, okay, so we move to part 2 of the meeting. So are we happy to exclude the press and public under section 100A for the Government Act 1972? Agreed? Right, so can we...
Do you want to let Maureen and Paul go?
Oh, yes, you're welcome to stay, but you can... yeah, please feel free to go. Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much for your report. Thank you. Have we got the